We're excited to have you here to our third annual MolochON 2019. And I hope everybody learns a lot about Moloch. If you're not very familiar with it, or if you're already an expert, I still think we'll have some good presentations for you. So the team, I'm Andy, Moloch creator. I've been working on it for a while now. I've lost track how long. I'll let Elyse introduce herself.
I'm Elyse. I revamped the user interface and changed it from 1995 blue to something hopefully maybe in this century.
Yes.
And so I've been working on that, and Andy's been forcing me to do back-end stuff and kicking me out of my comfort zone. So I do pretty much everything now.
Yes, everybody should be very thankful that Elyse joined the team, otherwise you would be stuck with the old UI, and I'm sure there's some of you who remember how lovely that was. And then we have Rosalie over here, who is doing our AV support and is kind of our open source community manager. Not kind of, she is. And if you have any issues or things, definitely talk to her. She's local, we're not. Which kind of brings us to our code of conduct. We have a code of conduct. Here's the short version of it. The long version's up on the GitHub page. But basically, we just want to be inclusive. We want everybody to feel welcome. We're hoping everybody feels like they can ask questions, be involved. And this is a very low-key, interactive summit today. So please ask questions. We would ask that you raise your hand. We can get a mic to you so that we can get it recorded. Otherwise, speakers, please repeat the questions back. It's probably a good idea just to repeat them back always. So this only kind of applies these days, but in general, we're doing the Chatham House rule. So that means you can talk about what we talk about here, but don't say who said it. Don't attribute it to a company, etc., unless they give permission. Since we're recording ours, that permission is already given, but some of the folks may not have theirs recorded and may not want to share exactly where it came from publicly. Clear as mud? Yeah. Oh, I was supposed to ask a question. So, we're gonna get everybody active. Everybody raise their hand. All right, see, I know this is hard work. Keep your hand up. Okay, for those of you who, this is like your first Moloch thing ever, you really don't know anything about Moloch, put your hands down. Okay, great, you still got hands up, that's good. For those of you who don't quite use Moloch like every day or in production or anything, put your hands down. Okay, so the people that are left, leave your hands up. Georgios, put your hand up. For those that are left, these are the people you want to find during happy hour. And ask them if what we said here is true or not, because I think Moloch is awesome. Okay, so we got a few people here that use Moloch all the time. Definitely come and find them. All of us that have our shirts, definitely find us during happy hour, but just make sure we're telling the truth, because we think Moloch is awesome. And there's a happy hour at the end over at the Oxford, which is in downtown Sunnyvale on that street that has all the restaurants. Murphy Avenue. Oh yeah, it's right there. So we hope you all join us.
Good morning. The obligatory, marketing speech here, but I'm Rich Rubenstein, Director of Threat Detection and Response, and I used to actually have Elyse and Andy on our team directly building Moloch on our behalf. I lost him because Andy wouldn't do anything I asked him to do except build Moloch. So he's part of engineering, but I run the Threat Detection and Response organization. We're their biggest customer. We're their biggest fans, too. Basically, however, I wanted to pitch a little bit about Verizon Media. It used to be Oath, which everybody can erase from their minds. It's also made up of what used to be Yahoo and AOL and a bunch of other brands. But Verizon Media, Paranoids is the brand of security. If you know somebody, obviously not yourselves, but somebody out there who's interested in the security job, theparanoids.com. It's got a list of like 20 openings that we're hiring for, and a lot of them get to use Moloch. So thought I'd just throw that in there. But otherwise, welcome. As Andy said, a lot of our team is here. They're very conversant with Moloch, and they can give you lots of insight on how we use it here at Verizon Media at the happy hour, at breaks, and so forth. So welcome once again, and back to.
Thanks. Okay, let's jump right into the recent changes this year and what we've been working on for the last 11 months since the last MolochON. Major changes, and we're going to have a demo of a lot of these in a little bit, but the major changes, Moloch 2.0, which was Elasticsearch 7. We were a little late getting that out there, and it's all my fault. I should have been working harder on it, I guess. But hopefully we'll do better for Elasticsearch 8. One of the things we're most excited about is the new homepage, which is now, it's been redesigned, it looks better, it's all in GitHub. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. Shortcuts, you can cancel queries, and we've been working on improved documentation. You know, documentation improvement never ends. We can use help, but we've been trying to actually have some documentation ready as features are released, which is sometimes hard, but we're getting better. So what was new about Moloch 2.0? Well, the biggest thing was getting ready for Elasticsearch 7. So Elastic likes to change there is someone from here from Elastic, so sorry, but they like to change how things work often, and especially for their major versions. And it's sometimes painful to upgrade, and this was one of those this was one of those versions where it was a little bit of a pain, mainly because they changed how the interface worked. Basically, they removed types, if you're familiar with Elasticsearch. And they changed a few other things. They're trying to make it a better product, which is great for all of us, but because Moloch maybe is different than other things where we're carrying data between versions for sometimes years, it makes it hard to constantly upgrade. And so that's why we're a little bit slower with it this year, because we're keeping our data a long time. And then we added this new variable shortcuts feature that we're going to be getting a great demo on in a little bit, and a few other things. So what's special about the new Moloch homepage? Well, it's hosted by GitHub, and it lives in GitHub, which means anybody can do a PR against it. There's nothing secret about it anymore. It's out there. Anybody can make changes, suggest changes, do whatever you want. So we're really hoping that people contribute to it more than the old one. And the other important thing is that settings are now linkable. So before, whenever I told somebody, oh, you need to go look at this setting, I could only kind of say, this is where it is on the page. Now I can deep link right to the settings web page. This is the setting that you need to go change. And so it's much easier when I help people. We're going to stop updating the wiki pretty soon. Right now, it just has pointers to mostly the new pages. There's some things there that are left over that we're going to delete soon. So we're going to soon wipe all of the old history away, and there'll only be content on the new homepage. But the wiki is kind of still there right now. Capture had a lot of changes. One of the coolest things was the connect method is now parsed. So previously, if someone used the connect method in HTTP, what was inside the connect method was not parsed. And so it would just be saved to disk. It wouldn't be analyzed. Now, whatever someone's using inside the connect method, which is usually TLS, but not always, especially if you have mischief folks, you can now see what it is. Moloch will classify it and tag it, and you'll get all of the metadata from that. The most exciting thing for some people is that we finally limit the disk queue. Previously, packets that were being written to disk could fill up memory and eventually either crash Moloch capture itself or sometimes the machine. Now there is a limit. It will stop writing packets to disk. If it hits that limit, it will tag those sessions saying that we couldn't save all those packets. And so it's easy to find out what's going on. And finally, for really big clusters, you can optionally turn on Elasticsearch auto-generate IDs, which makes Elasticsearch slightly faster, which is important for really big clusters. We also added a bunch of different fingerprints. So if you're into the fingerprints, JA3, JA3S, Ash, Community ID, I think there's some others, and we're working on adding even more. If you haven't seen Moloch before, this is what it would look like in Moloch. If for like SSH, we have this hash keys show up here, or fingerprints show up here, and as the traffic is going by, we fingerprint it, and you can use those with lookup tables or however you want to. If you know of a bad JA3 or whatever, you can now find them. We made a change with capture rules where you can now add some qualifiers, mainly starts with, contains, and ends with are the most important ones. So now you could search for strings, for example, that end with a particular thing. So this example here is we want to tag some awesome TLS sites that go by with a new field called awesome site. And that awesome site is going to be yes. We're going to set it to yes. And how do we match which sessions we want to tag? If protocols is TLS, and then if HTTP host is either www.aol.com or if it ends with yahoo.com. So any HTTP site that goes, or TLS site that goes by that ends with yahoo.com is going to have this field called awesome site set. Now, it would have been a little bit better if I had said .yahoo.com instead of just yahoo.com, because this means someone could do foo.yahoo.com or anything else and it would get tagged. So this is a bad example, but it's an example. Wise had some minor changes. We didn't really do that much work to Wise this year, unfortunately. We're hoping this next year we spend more time on it. The biggest thing we did was we moved the directory. So now inside of the source code repository, instead of buried deeply inside of capture, it's up at the top level as a first-class component. And we added a minor feature that several people asked about, which is JavaScript arrays are now supported. JSON arrays are now supported. And there's two forms of JSON arrays. You can have traditional JSON arrays, which is the first one, where you see IP, bracket, one IP, comma, the other IP. And then we also support the second form where it isn't a first-class array, but instead there's just a comma in the actual data field.
And I made a bunch of changes to Viewer this year. So always trying to improve Viewer and always trying to fix bugs. So here are some of the main features that we've added. Cancel queries is one of the biggest features. I think it's super powerful. It'll help you not thrash your ES cluster. I've added some hunt improvements to fix some of the workflow problems that we were experiencing. I got some feedback saying things weren't super clear, so I fixed that as well. We've added search variable shortcuts, so you can define variables that you can use in your search expressions. Again, we're always trying to improve that search expression experience so that you can create powerful queries as easy as possible. Then we also have connections improvements. We upgraded the D3 version, and we added some things as well. And then there's a multi-field intersection, kind of like the unique field values that we have, but now it's across multiple fields. And then a bunch more things. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a demo of all of those things. So, for all of you who are not familiar, this is the sessions page. This is the main landing page of Moloch. It shows you all of the sessions for your query. Right now I'm using test data. So this is our test suite. If you ever run Moloch on your local machine, this is the data you'll be using. So we have 272 sessions that we're searching. One of the things that we added is the ability to remove things with better granularity. So now you can remove data. Before you could just remove PCAP, or you could remove everything. Now you can remove PCAP or just your SPY data, just the metadata about your sessions. So this allows you to have a little bit more granularity in how you're deleting data from Moloch. As I mentioned earlier, we also have that intersection feature. So this is in the action drop-down menu. And it's kind of like exporting unique values, but for everything that you see in your table. So you might want to configure your table to display different field values. And then you can use this export intersection to view all of those values that are unique with their counts. And so this is more powerful when you modify your table, but it will always ignore the info column because that's a bunch of different field values. And it will also ignore start and stop time because those are often very specific. So this is a powerful tool in order to find unique values across your data set. I've also added a bunch of improvements to the session detail section. So when you open a session, you can see the detail about your session. So up top, you have all the metadata for your session. We call this SPY data. And then down below, you can see your packets. Now you can toggle source and destination packets. So you can view just source, just destination, or both. And another thing you can do is you can show the packet flow. So rather than the reassembled packets, you can see exactly how it's coming across packet by packet. So we think these are some powerful ways that you can view your data any way you want. And then we've also added another feature in the drop-down menu for field labels. There's a lot of options here, and one of the new options is to add exists to your query. I was finding that a lot of people didn't know this existed. They didn't know that this exists flag was useful, or they didn't know it existed at all. So I added this to the drop-down menu to hopefully uncover this hidden feature and make it a little bit easier to implement. Yep. As I mentioned before, we're always trying to improve the interaction with this search type ahead. This is where the analyst is going to do a lot of their work creating queries. One thing I've added is a field history. So say you're always searching for tags. Now, I've saved that in the history. So anytime you go and search for that again, it's going to show up top. It always filters to the top, and it has a little indicator that this is part of your history. So this will have the first 5 main tags that main fields that you have in your history, and it will also filter based on your search. And then you can remove it at any time by clicking the little X button, and that removes it from your history entirely. So it gives you a little bit more control on what data you see there in your dropdown. Another thing we did with this search bar is we added these little buttons to start and stop time. So before we didn't have these buttons, you always had to interact with this terrible, terrible time picker. I don't like time pickers. They're inherently buggy and terrible. Or you had to manipulate the text itself. And now you can click these buttons. So this goes to the beginning of the day for the start time. So you can quickly snap to the beginning of each day. And on the end time, you can snap to the end of each day. So this is a lot easier way to go day by day through your data. Another thing we added is an augmentation to the field drop-down menu. So field drop-down menu has a lot of options. One of the main options was open a new sessions tab with this value appended to your query. Now you can open a new sessions tab with this value only. So it's kind of like a pivot feature. If I wanted to pivot on that IP or that port or whatever value, you can pivot now. And you can also, like you can configure your columns in your table, you can also configure your columns in the info area. So the info column is a bunch of different, we call it info because it provides a lot of info for all different types of fields. And you can add any field you want now. So if you always want to see tags in your info field, you can see that there. And as always, you can set it back to the default because the default is best. The spy view page, for those who are not aware, is a way to view unique values for all the different fields, unique field values for different fields that you select based on your search. So here we have all the unique destination IPs. And maybe I want to pivot again because the pivot feature is really awesome. So This is something that we added back. It was a previous feature that got lost in the conversion when I upgraded the front end. So now we added this back, and you can pivot on a list of unique values. And it just creates that query for you, so you don't have to write this terrible query. Thank you. My favorite new feature is cancel queries. So there's this cancel button. So say you run a terrible query. You run your query through all time, or for some reason it's just taking forever. Now you can cancel your search directly in the little loading screen. And this helps you not thrash your Elasticsearch cluster, not bring everything down, so everyone can still be doing their job. This was difficult. You could do this task before by going to the stats page and then going to the ES task tab and then filtering for cancelable queries and then finding the query that was taking forever. And then you had to be an admin and then you had to click the cancel button. So now if you create that query, you can cancel it. So I think this is a really powerful feature. Also, on the stats tab, if you're an admin, you can also see the people who are running those queries, so you can shame them for running terrible queries. The Connections tab also has a bunch of improvements. I upgraded this from D3 version 3 to D3 version 5. It increased the speed, it fixed a bunch of little bugs I kept finding, and generally the code is a lot cleaner. So I've also added some new features on top of that upgrade. You can increase and decrease your text size. As before, you can increase and decrease your node distance. And this helps when you want to export this as an image. So you can make it look exactly like you want. You can snap things into place, and you can increase your text size. So if you want to export this and show this to your manager or just have a beautiful picture of a crazy graph, you can use these new features. Yeah.
This is where I reveal myself as part of the still just learning contingent here. When you display all these connections, many of them will be things that you already know. They are the Active Directory cluster or the Radius login systems. Is there a way to tag these so that they would show up with that name rather than with the IP addresses and port numbers so that you can quickly get a sense of what's normal and expected, and here's the odd one sticking out?
We don't really have that feature, no, but that'd be a great feature request. Something you can do is you can click nodes and links, and you can remove those nodes and links to get a better picture of what you want. So if you click a node, you can hide it and remove it so you can narrow it down to what exactly you want. But that'd be a great candidate for a feature request. We're going to go over how to create awesome feature requests in GitHub as well later.
The other thing that you could do is you can change what fields are showing.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I don't know if you can get some feedback here. Right now it's just source IP. You could change the field that's being displayed to any other field. I mean, I think what you're suggesting maybe is like a hierarchy where you could actually have two different things and it would pick one over the other. We'd have to work through it. Matt has some comments.
There is actually a way to do what you're asking, if I understand the question. You're wanting to instead show like a host name instead of an IP address? Like the name of the asset instead of an IP?
Not necessarily. Oh. Well, first-rate audio support here. Not necessarily the IP address, because when we look at something like Radius login servers, there's liable to be more than one. So I don't want to see 5 different connections up there that all say Radius 1, Radius 2, Radius 3. I'd like to see one big fat line that says, we talk to Radius.
Gotcha. Okay. Well then, never mind.
No, you're good. There's a way to get partially there already, so that, until I get around to sending this request into Elyse, we can still accomplish this.
So for anyone who's not aware, in the WISE config, you can set up reverse DNS. So it will add a field called asset to every session if there is reverse DNS on that IP. So for example, any machine that is joined to your domain should dynamically set its host name in reverse DNS. So that's how we get an asset tag for all of our sessions. And then in this connections graph, you can change the source IP to asset, and that might be helpful in determining what kind of machine it is.
Yeah, I think using WISE and making new fields or some other things, you could probably, approximate what you want to do, but not exactly what you want to do. So yeah, kind of just thinking through the flow, and Elyse is going to go over this, of kind of doing a feature request of what exactly we want, we could help you out.
Another thing that we've changed is now the pop-up pops up on the left-hand side. Before, it was a pop-up that popped up on top of the graph, and it kind of obscured the view of the graph. Now I pushed everything to the left-hand side. So I think that gives you a better picture, so it's not obscuring the view of your data. And then we've also implemented the ability to update these field values that you see on the left-hand side. You can see whatever field exists for nodes and links. So here's the node selector and here's the link selector. If you click this, you can show, for example, tags, since that's my example today. You can show all of the tags for that specific node. And you can also do the same thing for links. So this allows you to really customize your data and what you're seeing in these pop-ups. You can also hit the escape button to close those out. Trying to make better keyboard shortcuts. That's one of the things that we've gotten a lot of requests for. We can't go through the whole app just with your keyboard, and eventually I'd love to have that be a little bit more seamless. We've added a bunch of settings. One of the things that we've added is milliseconds. So now for sessions and for packets, you can view data in millisecond granularity. We only store this much granularity for sessions, so it only exists for sessions and packets. So if you go to the Sessions tab, you can now see, we see the millisecond start and stop time. And then also, we see that for packets as well. So you can see a little bit more granularity in exactly what's going on. One of my other favorite features is shortcuts. So these are here to help you create queries that are not crazy long and crazy ugly. So you start by naming it. And then if you're going to share this, you'll probably want to give this a description. If you share it, it will be shared to any user who has access to this Moloch cluster. And then you give it a list of values. So say I'm always doing a search through these IPs. I might want to create this so that I'm not always typing this every time. And this needs to be a comma-separated list or a new line separated list of values. You can create a list of strings, IPs, or numbers. At any time, you can share it by clicking the little shared button, and you can also edit the values here. So now, if you go to the Sessions tab or the Spy View tab or the Connections tab, you can use this by starting your query with a $sign. So say I want to look at all source IPs that were defined in that variable I just created. So you start it with a $sign, and it'll auto-complete for you. And now I see just those IPs that I defined in that new variable. I think this is really powerful because we've got a lot of feedback that people think, sometimes this search bar gets really unruly if you're creating really complex queries. Now you can simplify this by using shortcuts. I've also added notifiers. So previously, notifiers only existed in Parliament, which is our multi-cluster viewer. Now you can add these to your Moloch cluster, and this will alert for cron query matches as well as hunt job matches, and I'll go over that in just a minute. So let's create a few notifiers. You can create as many as you want. Oh no. Let me refresh the page. Okay. And then you can create as many as you want at any time, and these are shared for anyone. So anyone who has access to the cluster can view these, or cannot view or edit, but can use these notifiers. And admins are the only ones that can configure them. So you can add these to cron queries. A cron query is basically running a search against your data. You can run it against all time. You can run it now for the packets that are, or the sessions that are coming in now. And you can run it any time in the past. You're going to name your cron query. You're going to create an expression, whatever. I'll use the Moloch variable. You can tag it and export it to another cluster. And you set your tags. And now you can notify. So I'll use that Slack notifier. And this will notify on any first matches. So when the cron query first starts matching, it will send you a notification that says, hey, you matched X many sessions. And then it will also notify you every 10 minutes if there are more matches. And it will subsequently tell you every 10 minutes from there whether you got additional matches for this cron query. No, you cannot. It just won't alert. It just won't send an alert for you if there are no matches. The question was, can you do a negative match? And no, you just won't get an alert. But that is maybe a good idea for a feature request. So you can also add those notifiers to hunt jobs. Hunt jobs are a way to search not through the metadata of sessions like we were doing with searching through sessions. The hunt jobs search through the packets themselves. So you can search for text or regex, and the notifier will notify you every time there's the first match, and then it will notify you every 10 minutes if there's a subsequent match. It will also notify you if there's an error with the hunt job, and then when the hunt job is complete. So let's start a query or a hunt job on all our data. You can query for just the first 50 packets, or you can look through all the packets. It's going to be slower if you're looking through all the packets. It's just going to take a little bit longer. You can notify on any of the channels that you have configured. And then I'm just going to search for some ASCII text that I know exists. You can search just source, just destination, or both, and raw or reassembled packets. So I've tried to improve this workflow a bit. Before, when you created a hunt job, it just went straight into the queue and it had this tiny little loading icon. It was hard to tell when something was loading or when something was running and what exactly was happening. So now it first goes into the queue. So this one's queued, and it tells you it's number 1 in the queue because there's nothing else in the queue. Once it starts running, it gives you this nice indication that something is running. Only one hunt job can run at once. So this helps when many users are vying for space to run their queries. They know, oh, someone else is running a query. Mine is number 2 in the queue. You can pause this at any time. It jumps back down to the queue. If something else is queued, it'll start running that immediately. So don't do this unless you want to get bumped down the queue. You can play it back at any time, and if you hover over the status bar, it tells you exactly what's happening, how many matches have matched, and how many sessions it has searched through. So then it goes down into this hunt job history where you can see I have 4 matches. You can see if you're an admin or if you created this hunt job, exactly what the search text was, what it notified, and then you can go ahead and open those sessions. This just opens a new sessions tab with that hunt ID as your query, and it shows you all of the sessions that match that query. So all of these sessions have coconut ASCII text somewhere in the packets. Next, the stats page has one little tiny change. It's kind of hidden, so even though it's tiny, I just wanted to note it. If you hover over some of the columns, you'll see this little cancel button, and now you can clear values for specific rows or for specific columns, and this allows you to monitor some errors or to see exactly what's happening from a specific point in time. And if you click that button, it will tell you when you last cleared it so that you can see, oh, this is how many write tasks I've had rejected in this last minute since I clicked that button. If you refresh the page, this goes away. So don't refresh the page unless you want to lose that point in time. And then lastly, the Users tab has a bunch of new features that you can restrict the uses of Moloch for specific users. So sometimes you want to hide the stats page from users who don't need to see that. Sometimes you might want to hide the files page from users who don't need to see the files page. You can also hide PCAP and disable the download of PCAP for specific users. So if I save this, it shows you the stats page and the files page are both gone. Even if you go to that page, it's going to tell you permission denied, you cannot view this page. Also, since I restricted the download of PCAP, I no longer have a value or an item in this list to download that PCAP. And I no longer have PCAP at all. I just see the spy data. So you might want to hide PCAP from some of your users, and this is how you do it. So these are all the main features that have been added in the last 11 months since the last MolochON. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Awesome. Yep, you already asked him. All right, next I've made some improvements to Parliament. We haven't done a lot of changes in Parliament because we haven't gotten a lot of feedback about Parliament. So if you use Parliament, please tell me how to improve it, tell me features you need, and if you don't use Parliament, you should try it out. I've implemented a dark mode, a help page, multiple notifiers, and an improved workflow for issues. So I'll give you a demo of that now as well. So if you've never used Parliament, Parliament is our way to provide a dashboard of all your Moloch clusters. So if you log in and you select this little edit mode, you can create groups, and then you can create clusters within your groups. These contain links to the clusters, so you don't have to memorize all the URLs to all your Moloch clusters. You can add them here. There's also a way to create a JSON file if you don't want to interact with this UI, and then we will upload that, and that will have all of your information if you create that JSON file correctly. So one feature that everyone loves is themes. So now we have the dark theme. So if it's in the middle of the night and there's an incident and you come here, you can enable the dark mode so we don't blind you. I've also implemented a help page. One thing I got feedback on is, what is Parliament? What are all these things? What's the point of it? What do these random words mean? So this is my way to define what it is. It defines all the issues, exactly what those mean for you and your cluster. And then it also goes into how to set settings and describes all the settings in more detail. So I've added multiple notifiers. Before, you could only create one Slack notifier, one email notifier, and one Twilio notifier. Now you can create as many as you want. So you might want to notify Slack 1 for when ES is red and when ES is down. And you might want to do number 2 for when ES is dropping and out of date and has low packets. So this allows you a little bit more granularity on maybe who sees these notifications and who might need to respond to them. I've added some improvements to the issues page. The issues page is a list of all of the issues that all of your clusters are experiencing. Before, this was just a giant list, so if you had hundreds and hundreds of issues, it just showed hundreds and hundreds of issues. Now you can page them, you can sort them, and you can search for them, so if you're looking for a specific cluster. I've also tried to improve the workflow here. It was kind of confusing how to interact with acknowledging your issues and then dismissing your issues and ignoring your issues. Now you can select multiple issues and acknowledge them in bulk. Acknowledge them is basically saying, I know that this cluster is experiencing this issue and I'm working on it. So stop alerting me about it. I don't want to see it anymore. And then you can also remove issues in bulk. So say you fixed the fact that Elasticsearch was down on cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. Now you can remove those selected issues, and if that happens again, you'll get another notification. Otherwise, they're going to stay gone until you see that ES is down again. I've also added this big trash can button up top, and this will remove all of the issues that you've acknowledged across all of your clusters. So this is like the big red button. You've done a bunch of work and you don't want to go and select and find all of the issues that you've acknowledged. This deletes all the acknowledged issues all at once. So I think that's kind of improved some of the workflow for this page. Again, I'd love some feedback. So anyone that uses this, let me know. And those are pretty much all the changes for Parliament. Does anyone have any questions about Parliament or the changes that I've made?
If you raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic. Anybody?
Nope.
At least I'm loving all the owls. So good.
Thank you. Owls are cute.
They are.
All right, Andy.
So just going through some of the upcoming changes across all of our different components next. So for Elasticsearch, the biggest thing we want to do is look into the index lifecycle management part of Elastic. Right now, you have to use db.pl to expire your sessions and move them and shrink them and a bunch of other things. Elastic recently has added a method to do that themselves, so it seems kind of like a good idea to switch to their method instead of having to do it manually. So that's something we're investigating how to do. We're going to try and support version 8 much quicker than we did for 7, so whenever it comes out, we hope to be ready. The latest version of Moloch, which is still in development, 2.1.0, has support for re-indexing and shrinking indices directly in db.pl so that you can take indices that have too many shards or for whatever reason and shrink them. And I'll have an example of this in a future presentation. And then we really want to move some of the db.pl stuff into the UI just to make it easier for folks who don't like to use command line tools to work with Moloch. So, the next stage of Moloch's evolution is to have folks who are not quite as comfortable with command line use the tool. and we need to add some of those types of features. Oh, sorry.
On the other side of the spectrum as well, I would just, I can yell, or I can.
For the Hangout folks, we're recording. Great question.
I would just say as well, if you are going to be surfacing some of those features in your UI, on the other end of that spectrum as well, to have those same, I don't know how, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to implement stuff, but like to have them do it through the API as well. You guys' API is really good for interfacing with some of the features you have, like kind of from the side or from some other application that's communicating with Moloch. And so being able to have that ability to do some of those things, like from the command line is great, but actually having a documented API that's like your other ones would be terrific.
Right, so we definitely won't be getting rid of either command line or some way to do it from the command line, just because we're a big automation shop. We use Ansible for everything, so it's going to still work with some kind of orchestration system, whatever you choose. But I get the underlying thing there is our documentation, and we've started improving our documentation for the APIs, and we'll continue to do that. So yes, we will remember that. Great. Okay, so for capture, we've one of the biggest things we're going to do, we're going to talk about a lot, and I think there's a presentation later about it, is we've gotten some push to like think bigger than just IP full packet capture, and actually start investigating and supporting Ethernet full packet capture, other IP protocols, ARP, BGP, you name it, and we want to add that to Moloch and support that. And so we're doing some changes to how capture works to make it easy to plug in new parsers at all different levels. So not just at the TCP level, but at the IP and the Ethernet level too, and potentially even at the file format level. So we'll be adding support for that. Then there's a big glib2 upgrade. They've switched their build system to this new system. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but Meson, I don't know how you say it, which is yet another thing to learn and is a pain to do. So we haven't upgraded our glib2 for a while. The other thing we're going to do in relation to that is for the latest Ubuntu and CentOS 8, we're going to hopefully start supporting the OS versions of these libraries instead of statically compiling them, because they finally have caught up to the features that we needed from them. Previously, we built them ourselves because the OS versions were always so far behind. And at least with, I think, CentOS 8 and the latest Ubuntu, they are the new versions. The public suffix list, if you're not familiar with that, it's a way to get all the ways that domain names are formed out there. And it's a list publicly run by, I think, Mozilla and some other folks of all the top-level domains plus one and special domains that are hosting other things. And so it's a way to form domains and get from a host name what is the top-level plus one name of that host. And what we want to do is support several different features with that. We're going to make it a new field in Moloch itself. We're investigating adding a whole new feature similar to Matt's oil system, where we're going to keep track of the first and last use of those domains. And there's several other things we want to do it, but we're going to make it part of Moloch so that we can add a bunch of new features that use that feature, or use that list. One of the biggest things that we need help from the community for is sample rules. So we want to start including rules with Moloch distribution, because rules are hard to write if you're not used to it. And we'd love for people to submit any kind of rules that they've written themselves that we can include with Moloch. And then Quick. We need to support Quick better, HTTP 3. How many people know about Quick and know what Quick is? Okay, so if it's kind of scary. If you're a Google shop and you allow Chrome, and you allow either Gmail or YouTube or whatever on your network, probably a third or more of your traffic is going over Quick, and you don't even know it. Quick is basically what Chrome is using to communicate with all of the Google sites, and now it's the standard for HTTP 3 with some minor tweaks. And more browsers are about to support it, if not already. I think they just announced that it's coming very soon. And so we need to make sure we're supporting the latest standard of it. I think we're one version behind in Moloch currently, but we need to catch up. Quick should kind of scare you. I don't know. Maybe not. Whoops.
We're always trying to improve viewer. one of the biggest things that I keep trying to think about is visualizations. I want to make better visualizations. I want to make more visualizations. I think visualizations are very powerful, but we need some help from the community. Luckily, we've gotten some help recently, so thank you. But I think we need even more. So give us some ideas, open some feature requests, maybe even try and contribute some visualizations to Moloch. One of the main visualizations that I think needs a little bit of updating that we currently have is that timeline data you see at the top of the sessions page. I'd like to add some highlights like the high, the low, and maybe an average, so you can see some more granularity of the data and maybe interact with it a little bit better and get a little bit more from that visualization, because right now it's pretty, but I don't know how much it provides. In the past, I've added some optimizations to Elasticsearch. So rather than updating an entire document, I've been trying to just update fields in documents. So this improves for performance, and I'd like to continue doing this for more of our update features. Again, any help is welcome. I'd like to be able to resolve IPs. So when you hover over an IP, I'd like to resolve that. I think that could be really powerful. This is a feature request we've had in the books for quite a while, and I'd like to spend some time implementing this. As I mentioned earlier, our accessibility and our keyboard shortcuts are not the greatest. I've added more over time, but I think this can be improved. Eventually, I'd like to be able to traverse through most of the app with just the keyboard rather than relying on the mouse so much. And then one of the things that we promised last year that we didn't get to is improving multi-viewer. So right now, multi-viewer does not have all of the features that a normal viewer has, and I'd like to consolidate that, give all the features to multi-viewer, and maybe even create a new paradigm on how multi-viewer works. So again, suggestions are welcome, and pull requests are also awesome. And then as always, fixing bugs. Gotta always do that. So put in your bug requests. If you find a bug, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on Slack or just create a GitHub issue. That's the only way we know. We have a lot of people do that internally, but I think more need to do it externally as well. It really helps us out. So I promised you a slide about how to write good GitHub issues, and here it is. Writing good GitHub issues is super important because it helps us a lot. It decreases our time to decode what you're trying to say, and it also helps the community understand as well. So start by making sure your bug has not already been reported. So search through all the GitHub issues for the keywords of your issue. If it has been reported and you recognize it, provide more details. Say, hey, I have this issue as well, and here are my steps to reproduce. Or give it a thumbs up. Say, hey, this issue is something I'm experiencing as well. We filter those to the top, and that helps us prioritize our tasks. The best way to create an awesome issue is to describe the exact steps to reproduce your problem. Or if it's a feature request, go ahead and try and give us as much detail as possible as to how we can implement that feature and what exactly you imagine it to be. If it's a bug, explain your expected behavior, what's not working. And if it's a feature request, explain why the current behavior is not sufficient and what we can do to improve it. And then we have an issue template, so make sure to fill that out completely. We have more information on our contributed file on GitHub. We're always looking for help from the community. Add documentation is probably one of the easiest things you can do. We have a lot of little missing pieces, or maybe things aren't explained well enough. Add some documentation. It gives you some GitHub points, so do it. Submit bugs, again, super helpful. We can't find all these bugs ourselves. I don't use Moloch day to day to actually do analyst work. I develop it. And so I'm stuck in my little bubble. I need help from all of you who actually use it to find these bugs for me. Request features, like I said, that's how we know what to improve. And if you find features that are requested that you also want, comment and say, I also want that as well. And then the best thing you can do is submit pull requests. That helps us probably the most. Code is awesome. It takes no time at all for us to review and determine whether it's useful to our project, and that adds a lot of value. And we always like to see outside contributors. We really like to expand just Andy and I writing code. I mean, that doesn't look great. We need other people to help contribute. And another thing that's pretty easy is talk to the community on Slack. We have a pretty active Slack workspace. There's a link to it on our Molo.ch webpage. You can get there and talk to the community, ask questions, or provide answers to other people's questions. Super helpful. And some more specifics on how you can help is if you want to create a pull request, where to start might be to look through the issues, and we've tagged some issues with good first issue tags. So search for those. Those are the easier features or bugs to fix. That's a good place to start. You can also contribute sample rules and provide anonymized sample PCAPs to add to our test suite, especially if those PCAPs break something. It's good to have those in our test suite so that we can run tests against them, fix those problems, and make sure they never happen again. And then we're always looking for someone who enjoys packaging. I know that's probably a shot in the dark, but again, more information on our contributing. And yeah, software packaging for
Like RPMs, debs, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, we get complaints that they don't like how we package it, but they don't offer solutions, and right, so. Sure, go ahead. We're looking for anything.
all of the above. As I mentioned, our Slack community is very active. We've grown this year. We have more active users, more weekly active users, and we have over 1,000 messages sent weekly through private and public channels. So it's a great place to meet people, to get your questions answered, or to answer questions. We discuss bug and feature requests there pretty often. We will start the conversation there a lot of times before we open GitHub issues to narrow down the issue so that everyone can write the best GitHub issue possible. And then Andy specifically is always helping users with questions. A lot of people have questions on how to deploy Moloch, and Andy is the master of that. He knows all the things, so ask him.
But you too could become a master and help people. We do have some people in the community that are standouts, and
Yep.
please join them. So other things we want to do for the open source community, well, we've mentioned this about 10 times now, but improve the documentation. Either help us or we're doing it. I mean, it's coming along, but it can never be enough. We're very excited that people are starting to have their own Moloch meetups. At first, we were a little sad about this because they didn't invite us. But then we realized that it's probably a good thing, that means the project is successful if people are doing it without us there. We definitely have more PRs coming in, especially lately. There's several folks that have been contributing, which has been great. And we're, a sign of a healthy open source project is when more than one company is involved with it heavily. And so that is really a goal. Question? I can just repeat it. Okay.
Gotta get my steps in, Because there will be cookies later, so.
Okay, so about improving documentation. So how about let's say, instead of just writing documentation like what this or other thing does, about maybe linking to external how-tos and guidelines, because we actually have quite a bit of those, and we would like to bridge it better with what's already officially out there. So like I already have like a bunch of Moloch tutorials on GitHub because we do courses on this stuff back home,
Right.
but it's not strictly documentation.
Yes. So there's two parts to that, I would say, two answers. If it's general documentation, we have an articles page on our I can't remember what we call it right now, but our Learn pages. We have links to articles that are out there, and we're happy to add as many things as we find out there. And most of those are external. They're not internal things. So we have some links to Sans stuff. I can't remember if we have any links to yours or not. But then if you want to actually integrate it into the documentation, we're happy to add links to things if you're going to kind of commit to supporting it at least a little bit. There are many Moloch how to install guides out there that are so out of date, it's not even funny. And I'm tempted to go and comment on most of these and say, these aren't right, but I don't, because that's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I know, because since we do the courses like once a year, then we also kind of update them once a year.
Right.
So it's a thing.
But if
then
it's
again,
at least,
there's a bunch of stuff there that might not be so easy to find, like how to write a Wise plugin. Like there's like one page in the wiki that is missing some.
Then let's add some links.
Like figuring out those buffers took a bit time.
Yep. So let's add some links, but at the same time, I would say, would you be willing to contribute back? But
well, we're keeping the thing alive because we
Yes.
kind of have to. It's our job.
Yep. So
But as I said,
let's talk.
in practice, it works like once a year before we have to do our courses.
Okay. So what we probably should do is look at what you've done and integrate some of the stuff back, and thank you for it. Cool. Oh, sorry.
Oh, here we go. I got a mic.
Thank you. You keep asking for community participation here, which is great, and I'm sure we would all wish it were not this way, but most of us are afflicted with corporate lawyers. Could you go over briefly the general arrangement of the ownership and governance of this community and what kind of contributors agreement we might have to navigate through in order to be able to contribute?
No, so what I would say, I would start with our expert of this that would answer this question is unfortunately not here today, which is Gil Yehuda, who is more than happy to talk to anybody that has these kinds of questions at length. He will actually talk to your lawyers and your VPs and try and convince them. He's worked with several companies here that I won't name their names unless they want to announce themselves, but that has helped to navigate the problem that you're facing. And I know what company you're at, but he's talked to those people too. And they're trying to, it is stressful. It's hard. We have switched away from a CLA that needs to be signed to one that is just in the pull request. And by submitting the pull request, you've agreed, because supposedly this is the way of the future. But I can't give you the lawyer answer, and I'm not going to try. I don't know if you want to.
But so Gil's actually my boss. He's like an awesome guy. So I could actually put him in touch with you if you wanted. And he's incredibly knowledgeable. And like Andy said, happy to work with lawyers, VPs, anybody you'd like. It's kind of his thing. So
Yes.
yes, Gil Yehuda. GILYEHUDA. And I'll bring you his email address as well. He's a good guy. Yep.
Yeah, he's definitely very helpful in this area, and has, like I said, has helped other people, other companies here. So, I'm sorry. Any other questions? So one of the things we wanted to put together, because this has come up several times in the last month, is kind of what are the principles behind Moloch, and this is a work in progress. So don't look at this as a final thing, but this is kind of like, how do we operate? What do we focus on? What kind of PRs are we going to accept and not accept, et cetera, et cetera. So, fundamentally, Moloch is about full packet capture. Full stop, that's what we want to be about. Currently, it's full packet capture having to do with IP traffic, and we want to expand that to be more than just TCP/IP or UDP, and expand it to almost any IP protocols or Ethernet protocols. And so that's going to be a big work in progress. But still, we're not trying to be an IDS. We're not trying to be a NIDS, an NSM, Bro, Suricata, whatever. We're not trying to replace those. We are a full packet capture system, and that is our goal. That doesn't mean we won't add some of the features that are similar to those, such as alerting or notifications and other things. But again, that's all secondary, just improvements. We need to be and want to be large scale, supporting hundreds of gigabits per second, terabits a second, whatever. And to that end, we're always going to be a session-based system and not a packet-based system, a packet-based system. So that's, I mean, it's a little nuance there, but it's all about scale. We have to collapse the packets into sessions in order to write that to Elasticsearch and have Elasticsearch not fall over, right? We need Elasticsearch to be able to work. If we put every single packet into Elasticsearch, your Elasticsearch cluster would be 10 to 100 or whatever times bigger, and it probably would not even work. Question?
So I'm one of those people who have some familiarity with Moloch but don't use it much. When you say you have to collapse some of the data, are you actually dropping data?
No. It's collapsing the metadata is probably the better way to put it.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
So instead of writing the metadata, if you're a Wireshark user, you see the metadata for every single packet. And you can do a query against every single packet and select a packet. Like, I want the packet that's this timestamp, blah, 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 blah. Moloch, we're never going to do that. It's going to be a time range. It's going to be collapsed into a session. And you can get that session that has that packet in it, but you're going to get all the packets around it. And so that kind of brings up like the next thing, which is we only want to collect useful metadata. We're not going to collect the metadata about every single packet. We're not going to, when you open up Wireshark for some of these protocols, there's thousands of fields. We're not going to collect all of those fields ever. We're going to collect what we consider to be useful, what you consider to be useful. It's a community effort to try and figure out what that is, and it sometimes takes a few iterations to get it right. But the goal is to select the session that you're interested in and then export that for further analysis, if you need to. So if you're into, I need that 5th bit, and is it this number, Moloch is not going to by default have that. You'll be able to find the sessions that might have that and then send it into another tool to get it. And finally, we're all about being open. So we want to be transparent. We like to use GitHub for everything. We like to use Slack, have all our conversations on the public channels. I know some people don't want to have public conversations and want to do one-on-one, and that's fine, but sometimes I will move you off to the public channels if I think other people will be interested in it. And it's not because I don't want to talk to you, it's because I want other people to learn, or I think it's something that other people would be interested in. So don't feel like if you Slack me directly and I say, can you post this on the public channel, that I'm, slighting you or whatever. It's more that I want everybody to be able to participate and learn what you are asking about. The one big exception is if you have a PCAP that's failing and it has data that you don't want the rest of the world to see, that's fine to DM it to me. But still, like, if the discussion moves away from the PCAP that's specific to you, I would like to move it to the public channel just so that everybody is involved. And we have several channels. Sometimes people feel that Moloch channel has too many people. If you want to talk about the Elasticsearch, there is an Elasticsearch channel, etc. And one of the big things about being open that I'm particularly proud of is that we use the distribution that's on the web. So there's some other big companies that I won't name who have these cool open source projects that don't actually use what they distribute. They have their own special version that's been recompiled that uses a special database that uses this or that. We actually use what's up there. So we're using what's there. Any questions?
How do you extract the metadata you need from the PCAPs? Do you use T-Shock or Wireshark or have your own parsers?
We have our own parsers. So, I mean, when we originally started prototyping years ago, we looked at using T-Shark and other tools, and they're just not meant for dealing with this level of traffic because they're extracting everything and because of how they're designed, they're designed to see everything. I mean, that's their goal. It just doesn't scale for this level of traffic. Great. Thanks.